Peanuts, and a warm welcome to any new listeners joining Crimes from the Peanut Gallery. Now, this podcast covers true crime cases that may not be suitable for young listeners. There may be graphic and violent content, so listener and viewer discretion is advised. In today's episode, guys, I'm going to examine how killers can live among us undetected. I'm going to focus heavily on 3 of my previous serial killers. So we're going to go with Rodney Alcala, Dennis Rader, and Ted Bundy. So I'm going to start off with Rodney. Now, we've got a little bit of a different setup today. You can sort of see Charlie in the background just there. But you can see my husband's shoe collection. The reason is we've had a little bit of an incident in our garage where it's been leaking, but you get to see his shoe collection, which doesn't look that vast, but it is pretty cool. I like it anyway, but that's just me. Just so you guys are aware. So we've got a bit of a different feel today, and I am filming at night. So it's a little bit of a different ambience tonight, which is kind of fun, but I'm, trying something new. All right. So in today's episode, I'm going to delve into a bit of a chilling question. It's how do killers live among us undetected? Now, we're going to explore firstly the disturbing life of Rodney Alcala. He's also known as the dating game serial killer. Now, before we begin, once again, guys, this episode is going to contain graphic descriptions of violence, including crimes against children. So listener discretion is strongly advised. Now, Rodney Alcala was born Rodriguez Jacques Bourquois. It's in 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. He's got an IQ of 135. Now, he's considered obviously very intelligent. He was charismatic. He's handsome, he's quite popular in high school, and those traits really helped him blend in to society with ease, so he really went very undetected. He served in the US Army, he studied fine arts at UCLA, and he impressed his teachers and his fellow peers. But on the surface, he was the kind of person you'd never really suspect, right? So beneath that charm was an absolute predator, guys. He didn't just hide, though. He thrived in plain sight. Now, after being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and being discharged from the army, he began a disturbing pattern of reinvention. He would use aliases such as John Berger to enroll at NYU. He later worked as a counselor at a children's camp in New Hampshire. So think about this though, guys. A convicted sex offender is working with children under a fake name. He also worked in LA. There were some times where he was a typesetter during the coverage of the Hillside Strangler murders. He was interviewed as a suspect, but ultimately he was cleared of the Hillside Strangler murders. All the while, he's actively in parallel committing some grotesque crimes. He posed as a professional photographer. He convinced I don't know how many women and children to model for him, but it was countless numbers. And many of these photographs remain unidentified to this day. So investigators believe that actually includes additional victims. He used charm, confidence, and a camera to gain trust, which those tools allowed him to really operate in quite a public and forum and space. What's even more chilling, though, is he worked in an office alongside another serial killer that I've done a podcast on, and that's Richard Cottingham. Neither man knew of the other person's crimes. But while he's hiding in plain sight, his victims were suffering in, we'll call it silence, and sometimes it was worse. In 1971, he raped and murdered Cornelia Crilly. She's a flight attendant in New York. Her case remained unsolved for almost 40 years. In that same year, he was identified by 2 teenage girls at the camp because they saw him on a wanted poster. Their courage led to his arrest, but without testimony from his previous victim, Tali Shapiro, he was only convicted of child molestation and only served 34 months. Now, guys, I am being really brief about some of the crimes here today. It's not that I want to not reflect on the victims or anything like this time around. It's more I've covered them off in my previous podcasts. So if you haven't had an opportunity or this is your first time watching my podcast, I'm actually going to link in my 3 podcasts that I've done previously on these serial killers so that you can go and have a listen. I focus really, really heavily on the victims when I'm talking about the serial killers and what they've done. This is my mini series, so it's a little bit of a different feel to it. So just so you're aware, guys, I really, really do have a heavy focus on a lot of their victims in my serial killer podcast. He is released, he reoffends, and he continues to manipulate his way into jobs and social circles. In 1977, he murdered Georgia Wixt. She's a nurse that was found beaten and strangled in her Malibu apartment. Her skull had been bashed with a hammer, and her genitals had actually been mutilated. Now, how many times have we trusted someone simply because they were professional or friendly? It really forces us to look at the story on how we really do. Do we really know the people around us? His crimes weren't just brutal, they were calculated, they were predatory, and they spread across decades and states. His victims, though, would range from the age of 8 to 32, and each case revealed a disturbing pattern of manipulation, violence, and evasion. So let's start with Morgan Rowan, who came forward in 2021 to reveal that she's actually Rodney's first victim. In 1968, she had met him on the Sunset Strip, and he lured her to his apartment under the guise of a party. Once inside, he would tie her up, gag her, and beat her until she vomited blood, and he would sexually assault her and rape her. Her friends broke in and rescued her, but the trauma that she endured would just stay with her for a lifetime. Just months later, she would attack a couple of months later, he would actually attack 8-year-old Tali Shapiro. Now, he abducted her on her way to school, he beat her with a steel bar, and he had left her for dead when the police came knocking. Miraculously, though, she actually survived this. Now, she would spend 32 days in a coma and months of recovery. In 1971, we've got Cornelia Crilly. She's a flight attendant, and she was found raped and strangled with her own pantyhose. Her murder would remain unsolved until DNA evidence would link him in 2011. Then came Georgia Wixt, a nurse that's found in her apartment in Malibu. It was her genitals were mutilated, and that just seemed to this seemed to be the escalation point for all of his violence. 1978, Charlotte Lamb was found in a laundry room. She's posed with her hands behind her back, and she'd been strangled with a shoelace. DNA on her earrings found in his storage locker would actually confirm her identity. Then you've got Jill Barkham. She's just 18. She was posed on a service road, and she'd been strangled with multiple items. She was a runaway from Brooklyn. She's barely 5 foot tall, and she weighed less than 100 pounds. Then you've got Jill Parenteau. She is 21 years old. She's a computer key punch operator, and she's found dead in her Burbank apartment. She'd been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled, and her body is posed with pillows under her shoulders. And then there was Robin Samso. She's a 12-year-old girl that's abducted on her way to her way to a ballet class. Her remains would be found 12 days later. She'd been mutilated and she was scattered. Her murder would actually finally lead to his conviction and death sentence. These are just the confirmed victims, though. Again, guys, investigators do firmly believe that there are many more, and they're among those photos that they found in that storage locker. So what does it say about the system when someone can commit this level of violence across multiple states and still evade capture for years? His journey through the justice system is a case study in failure, delay, and massive missed opportunities. Despite him being registered as a sex offender, he was allowed to travel to New York, where he would murder Ellen Hoover, who was a 23-year-old socialite. Her body was found months later, but investigators didn't have enough evidence to charge him at the time. And when he was finally arrested for Robin's murder, the trial was massively chaotic. His public defender had to stand down due to a conflict of interest. Witnesses are discredited, and the defense argued that there was no proof of actual kidnapping. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but that sentence was actually overturned twice. Once because the jury was told about his prior convictions, and again because a witness had been hypnotized. But it wasn't until 2010 that he was finally convicted of 5 murders. In 2011, he's indicted for 2 more in New York. Now, he died in 2021 on death row, but he was never tried for all of his crimes that he's been suspected of committing. Now, what do we think, though? How many lives do we think could have been saved if the justice system had just been a little bit faster and if parole officers had been far more vigilant? So what do you think we could learn from his story? First, It's clear that evil doesn't always wear a mask, right? He's intelligent, he's articulate, he's socially adept. He used all these traits to manipulate not just his victims, but institutions, schools, employers, even law enforcement. His ability to blend in shows how predators exploit our blind spots in society. Second, it's the importance of background checks. They can't be overstated. He appeared in a dating game TV show in 1978 and introduced himself as a successful photographer. The show didn't even run a background check, so no one knew he was a registered sex offender, and thankfully the woman that chose him, Cheryl Bradshaw, she sensed something was off and refused to go on the actual date. Third, forensic scientists played a crucial part in finally bringing him to justice. DNA evidence linked him to multiple cold cases decades after the crime. For example, we've got Jill Barkham, and her skull had been crushed and she'd been, strangled with multiple items. And the DNA from that particular crime scene linked him. It's just appalling to me that the amount of times that there was potential for him to get caught and the system just failed so many times. They failed 12-year-old Robin so badly because if he had just been convicted earlier or found earlier, that 12-year-old girl would have never died. So fourth, public awareness and witness bravery. People like Donald Haynes, who helped save Tali Shapira, survivors like Morgan Rowan, who came forward decades later to tell her story. And finally, we've really got to just acknowledge some of the failures of the justice system. He was arrested multiple times due to legal he was released all times due to legal technicalities and a lack of testimony. These gaps would slowly allow him to continue his murdering spree and his just foulness on society. But it's a sobering reminder that justice delayed can actually end up meaning justice denied. So what changes can we make in our communities, our institutions, our legal systems to ensure that someone like Rodney that never slips through those cracks again? I don't know if we can even I don't know if we could ever give an answer clearly to that, because obviously, given this one serial killer, and I'm about to go into another two, we clearly as a society are very trusting of people. Me personally, I know I would have fallen for probably Rodney's. I'm a photographer. I'd love to take pictures of you. You're gorgeous enough. I think when I was that teenage girl, I would have 100% gone with him. Ted Bundy, him being on crutches, 100% I would have helped him. I wouldn't have even thought sideways. BTK, Dennis, he looked like an old man. He doesn't look like he's going to hurt me. So let me tell you, I don't think it's always a failure of justice. I think it's a failure of us as people sometimes that we're not more vigilant about this kind of stuff. But again, why wouldn't you be? You just want to be a kind person. I'm going to probably get a little riled up just because I do want to be vigilant and I do see the fact that perhaps, the justice system, but they do hide in plain sight and they do look normal. It's not like when you go and watch those horror films and, the crime TV shows. They look like normal people. They don't look like people you're going to sit there and go, God, you're going to, chop off my head or something like that. Terrible way to put that, by the way. But that's what I mean. This is why they go undetected, because of these type of circumstances. Now, Rodney, that's a little bit of a different story. I think it's definitely a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. But again, it is what it is, right? All right. Sorry. Went off on a bit of a tangent and went off on a bit of a rant there. But next we've got Dennis Rader. Now, he's BTK. So we're delving into the chilling story of him. So he's better known as BTK, which was bind, torture, and kill. Now, if you're a true crime fan, you've literally seen documentaries on this guy or even watched Mindhunter on Netflix, where his crimes are depicted. His daughter, Kerry, features really, really heavily on a lot of documentaries. So it offers you like a little bit of a glimpse into the man she knew as her father, and it's so different from the man that the world sort of knew to become this monster. Now, he's born in 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He's the oldest of 4 boys. His father was a Marine. He turned into a gas worker. The family would later move to Wichita. And though he seemed like a normal boy, he joined the Boy Scouts. He attended school. He harbored some serious dark fantasies from a really young age. bondage. Now, he craved power, control, and particularly over women. He developed some really sadistic fantasies, which would involve, you heard it, bondage and torture. Psychologist Catherine Ramsland described him as someone who wanted to feel significant and felt destabilized by women. His fantasies specifically intensified during puberty, involving imaginary bondage scenarios and even at times animal torture. He was a loner. He's described as quiet, polite, meticulous, and traits that helped him again blend in seamlessly in society. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to pause for one moment while I take a little bit of a sip. Here's my Care Bears drink bottle today. I did forget to tell you, we've got Snoopy and Care Bears behind us today. So, all right. So his descent into murder would begin in 1974. Where he is unemployed, he's restless. He stalked the Otero family. He's drawn in by their Hispanic appearance. So on January 15th, he broke into their home, tied the family up, and murdered them one by one. Joseph, Julie, Joey, and Josie. And this is an horrific sequence of strangulation and suffocation. He even returned to the scene to retrieve a knife he'd forgotten. Probably one of the most disturbing factors about Dennis's story is not just what he did, but how he managed to live among community for decades without raising any type of suspicion. He wasn't a recluse or a drifter. He was a husband, he's a father, he's a church leader, a Cub Scout volunteer, and he's even a city employee. So he was, by all appearances, a really normal and model citizen. So let's start with his family life. He married Paula in 1971. They met through church and married within months. Paula would spend over 30 years married to a man she believed had been kind, quiet, and dependable. She had no idea that her husband was BTK. And that's not a judgment, by the way. It's a testament to say how well he compartmentalized his life. He was so convincing in his role as a husband and father that not even his children, including his daughter Kerry, was completely unaware of this dark side. So he is hiding it incredibly well. Professionally, he's holding a series of jobs that gave him access to homes and neighborhoods. Most notably, though, he worked for ADT Security for 14 years, installing alarm systems. Think about that, though. He was literally helping the people to feel safe while secretly plotting to violate their safety. Later, he became a compliance and animal control officer in Park City. In this role, he actually enforced local codes, issued citations, and even took people to court over minor incidences. He was known, again, for being meticulous, sometimes overzealous, and always prepared. One woman contested a $25 fine he had issued, and he showed up in court with a satchel full of documents and won the case. He was also deeply involved in his church. He'd served as a president of the church council. He led Cub Scout meetings and was seen as a real pillar of the community. People really trusted him. They welcomed him into their homes. They even imagined that the man who helped organize those church events and taught the children was this. They just couldn't believe this same man is stalking, torturing, and murdering innocent victims. What's chilling probably the most is that he used his jobs to actually conduct or facilitate his crimes. His job at ADT gave him the knowledge of security systems. His position in the city gave him authority and access to people. His church and community involvement, that gave him a huge amount of cover. And his quiet, polite demeanor made him seem really harmless. This is what I'm talking about, guys. I wouldn't have looked at him and thought, you're going to strangle me, you're going to torture me, just wouldn't have even occurred to me. So even when complaints were made against him, like he was being too strict or petty, local officials would actually side with him. He was really seen as efficient and reliable. No one even thought to connect the dots. No one suspected the man writing citations for overgrown lawns was also writing letters to the media detailing out his murders. And it's in this segment of his life, it raises some really uncomfortable questions. How many people do we interact with daily who might be hiding something? How do we recognize the signs of someone who's living a double life? And how do we reconcile the image of a loving father with that of a cold-blooded killer? So his ability to hide in plain sight wasn't just about deception, it's about mastery. So he understood how to manipulate perception, how to blend in, and how to exploit trust. So for over 30 years, it worked. He didn't just kill, he wanted credit for his murders. He needed to be recognized. And when the media didn't give him the attention he craved so desperately, he made sure they did. In October 1974, just months after his first murders, Rader actually contacted the Wichita Eagle. He directed them to a book in a public library, and inside there was a letter claiming responsibility for the Otero family murders. The letter contained details only the killer could know, and it confirmed its authenticity. The police asked the paper not to publish it, though, fearing the public panic and the false confession. But a rival publication got a hold of this and printed parts of the letter anyway. This was really BTK's twisted relationship. This was the beginning of it with the media. He wrote letters, poems, and even puzzles. He taunted the police, he mocked their efforts, and laid out his crimes with quite a disturbing amount of pride. One of his letters actually read, "I can't stop it, so the monster goes on. Maybe you can stop him. He has already chosen his next victim or victims." He signed off with his chilling acronym, BTK, and it wasn't just a signature for him, though. It's a brand. He wanted to be known, he wanted to be feared, and he wanted to be studied. In 1978, he sent a poem titled "Death to Nancy" to the Wichita Eagle, taking credit for multiple murders and demanding national attention at this stage. He even suggested names for himself, but BTK was the one that really stuck. His communications were really erratic, though, but they were calculated. So he would go silent for years, then he'd re-emerge with a letter or a package. In 1988, he sent a letter to the Fager family claiming he didn't commit the murders, but he admired the killer's work. The letter wasn't confirmed as genuine until police found a copy in his stash 17 years later. In 2004, almost a decade after complete silence, BTK returned. He sent photos, victims' items, and even asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. They said no. He believed them. But this mistake would be his undoing. Now, his downfall began with this floppy disk. In 2004, he sends one to the police thinking it was untraceable, but forensic experts actually found metadata that linked it to his church and a document authorized by someone named Dennis. This was enough to start the surveillance, so investigators obtained DNA sample from his daughter's medical records. It matched the semen that was found at several of the victims' BTK's crime scenes. So in 2005, he was arrested. He surrendered really quietly and almost as if he knew the end was finally coming to an end. So what followed was a stunning 30-hour confession. He spoke endlessly. He detailed out murders, every method, every fantasy. He described his crimes with chilling amounts of detachment. And it was like he was recounting a routine of his day. He was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. His trial began in June 2005. He pled guilty, waived his rights to a jury trial. Judge Gregory Waller sentenced him to 10 consecutive life sentences, plus a hard 40 for the murder of Dolores Davis. He would be told he had to serve 175 years before being eligible for parole. His capture really, though, it did bring a sense of relief to the community after decades of raised questions, though. But it brought about a lot more for that community. How did he evade capture for so long? How did he live among us? Why was he not detected? It's really, again, another chilling reminder that evil doesn't wear a mask, guys. Sometimes it wears a uniform and attends your church. It waves at your neighbors. He lived among the community for decades. He's respected, and even at times he's admired. So once again, how many others are like him and they walk among us on a day-to-day lifestyle? It really is quite a chilling account of how much just people fly underneath the radar. It's not a reflection on police or anything like that. It's just they are so good, guys. Some of these serial killers, and I'm not saying all of them because it's not all of them because I can't say that. What I can say is that It's chilling to think that you can interact with a serial killer on a daily basis and perhaps never know what they've been doing for 30 years. Now, our next guy, Ted Bundy, can tell you right now, would have fallen hook, line, sinker for everything he would have done. I would have not even thought a thought by helping someone who had a broken leg or a broken arm. To me, he's not an attractive guy, but I can see the appeal. You know, he's got a bit of a Bobby Kennedy thing going for him. He's okay looking. I might have been more attracted to the fact that he had a Vita bug. My husband has a 1968 Vita bug. So maybe that's what would have made it a little bit more enticing for me. But I can tell you right now, and unfortunately, dark hair, slim girl, possibly one of what he would have inspired as one of his victims. But I can tell you this right now, guys, I would have been dead. There wouldn't have even been a thought I would have wanted to help someone. So we are going to now look at him as he's one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. His story is not just about violence, but about deception, manipulation, and again, the ability to hide in plain sight. Ted Bundy, he was born Theodore Robert Cal in 1946, and from the beginning, his life was shaped as a lie. He grew up believing that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his sister. This deception meant to shield his mum from the stigma of being an unwed mum, planted seeds of confusion and resentment that would grow over time. This wouldn't be the first time, though, that this would be where it would stem from, at least I think. Now, apparently in his early years, they're marked by detachment and probably some emotional distance. Despite efforts by his stepfather, Johnny Bundy, to bond with him, he remained really aloof. He was described by some as charismatic and popular, while others would describe him as a loner. The duality became a defining trait, though. His ability to charm and manipulate was central to his crimes. He studied psychology, he worked on a suicide hotline, he even volunteered on political campaigns. He appeared intelligent, empathetic, and trustworthy, but behind this mask was a man capable of just unspeakable violence. His relationships were really complex. One woman, known by the pseudonym Stephanie Brooks, she broke his heart and may have influenced his choice of victims, many of whom strongly resembled what she looked like. Another was Elizabeth Klumpfer. She stayed with him even as those suspicions grew inside her. She eventually, though, would report him to police, but her warnings would go unheeded. His victims were often young, attractive women with long brown hair, parted in the middle, and he used ruses. He pretended to be injured. He impersonated a police officer just to lure them. His first known victim, Karen Sparks, she survived a really brutal attack. Others, like Linda Healy and Susan Rancott, they were not so fortunate, though. What's chilling is how ordinary these encounters really seemed, though. A man asking for help with his books and needing assistance to load a sailboat. And these are at really public places, guys. There's parks, there's campuses, there's libraries. And yet all of his victims seem to just vanish without a trace. Witnesses would describe, though, a man in a sling, on crutches, asking for help. They saw a brown Volkswagen Beetle, but Bundy, he still remained really elusive during this time. He exploited that kindness in women, though, and he targeted women who were helpful, trusting, and unaware of the danger lurking behind that smile. Now, this part of this segment reminds us that predators will often rely on our social instincts or our desire to help, trust, or connect with someone. He weaponized empathy, and in doing so, he turned everyday moments into deadly traps. What's more disturbing is how long it took for these patterns to emerge, though. The disappearances, they're scattered across states. And again, local law enforcement agencies, they didn't communicate very well at that time. So Bundy knew this, and he used geography as a shield. So he would move from Washington to Utah to Colorado, and then he would escape to Florida. And each move reset that sort of suspicion. Each city gave him a new and a fresh start. The victims were not just statistics, though. They were daughters, their students, their friends. Their stories deserved to be told, not just a part of his legacy, but as a reminder of the lives that have been lost for a man who knew how to hide. in plain sight. Now, it's in November 1974, though, that he makes a mistake. He attempts to kidnap Carol Duranche. She's posed as a police officer. She escaped and reported the incident. The same night, though, another girl, Debbie Kent, vanished. A handcuff key was found in the parking lot, and it matched the cuffs that actually were on Carol. Despite this mounting evidence, Ted Bundy continued to evade capture. He moved from Utah to Colorado, and the murders resumed. His charm and his calculated moves kept him one step ahead, though. He was finally arrested in 1975 during a routine traffic stop. This always shocks me. So police, they find suspicious items in his car, a rope, handcuffs, a ski mask. He's charged with kidnapping and later linked to multiple murders through forensic evidence. His trials were really dramatic, though, because he represented himself, he charmed the courtroom, he even proposed marriage during proceedings to someone, and the evidence was just really overwhelming. It's bite marks, it's eyewitness testimony, and it's his own confessions that would end up sealing his fate. In 1989, he was executed in Florida. Crowds gathered outside the prison, though. They were cheering when the news broke of his death. There was a lot of cheering. His story, though, raises disturbing questions about human psychology. He exhibited traits of narcissism, sociopathy, and psychopathy. He compartmentalized his life, and he would present very, very normal sides while committing some of the most appalling acts against women I've ever read about. Experts suggest, though, that killers like Bundy, they exploit trust, they manipulate perception, and they thrive on control. His ability to blend in, to appear harmless, it made him even more dangerous. He didn't lurk in the shadows, though, at all. He lived among us. He was the guy at the office party, the students with you at your psychology class, the volunteer at the crisis hotline. He's articulate, he's well-dressed, he's polite, he dated, he laughed, he made plans, and all the while he's hunting women in his spare time. This is probably what makes his story so terrifying. He didn't just hide. He really thrived in the spotlight. He didn't need to isolate himself. He didn't live off the grid like a Ted Kaczynski. He blended in so well that even the closest to him couldn't reconcile the fact that he was a monster. The daughter of Liz, who grew up with Ted Bundy, he just sort of can't. She even said it was very hard for her to correlate that the man she knew and loved was a serial killer. It is still, to this day, probably one of the biggest serial killer stories that I still hear heaps on. I'm fascinated by him. I'll be honest. I think there is something fascinating about him. Because he understood how people worked. He knew how to gain trust. He knew how to deflect suspicion. He knew how to manipulate your emotions. He used his knowledge of psychology not to heal, but to harm. And he used his charm not to connect, but to control. So his ability to move across states, change identities, exploit legal gaps, allowed him to continue for years. He's a master of manipulation, not just of people, but of the system. He knew how to exploit weaknesses in individuals, institutions, and in society itself. He knew how to make people doubt themselves, though. Elizabeth, his longtime girlfriend, reported him to the police multiple times, but she was told numerous amounts of times there's not enough evidence. She was made to question her own instincts. Bundy continued, even though in her back of her mind, she's like, I think he's the serial killer. So living among us doesn't just mean by proximity, it means integration. He was a part of the fabric of everyday life. And that's what makes his story a really, really big warning, not just about serial killers, but about masks we all wear. So how do you think they go undetected? Through charm, manipulation, the cracks in our system? Ted Bundy's story is certainly about that, but it's not just about murder. It's about the danger of ignoring our own instincts. We often think evil is something really obvious, something we can spot a mile away. But Bundy should actually teach us that evil can be subtle, it can be persuasive, and it's deeply embedded in our everyday lives. He reminds us to trust our gut, to question what feels off, and to never assume that danger looks a certain way. So this episode isn't just about Bundy, and it's not about Rodney Alcala, and it's not about BTK. It's about vigilance. It's about awareness. It's not just about understanding that dangerous people are often the ones who seem the most, like the least threatening, the ones we trust the most. We must learn from these stories, and not just to remember the victims, but to protect ourselves and others. We must challenge the idea that evil doesn't just wear a mask of horror. Sometimes it actually wears a smile, and it's quite charming. So guys, thank you so much for listening to my episode. If you found it really awesome, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you've enjoyed this video. I do have a bunch of other videos for you to go and watch. Please go and explore my other videos. But to my fellow peanuts who have already joined me previously, I hope you have a fabulous weekend. And to my new fellow peanuts, have a fabulous weekend. Thank you all guys so much. See ya.